My name is Gloria, and I'm 32 years old. I'm standing outside my childhood home in Connecticut this Christmas Eve, watching through the frosted window as my family celebrates without me. For the eighth year in a row, they removed every photo of me from the walls, deleted me from family albums, erased every trace that I ever existed in this house. They think I disappeared, but the truth is, I've been watching all along. Before I tell you how I became a ghost in my own family, let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever felt invisible to the people who should love you most, please like and subscribe to hear how I finally found my voice and reclaimed my life from those who tried to erase it. Growing up in Westport, Connecticut, I thought we were the perfect American family. My parents, Robert and Margaret Patterson, built their dream life on the foundation of success and status. Dad ran a commercial real estate empire, while Mom curated our family's image like she was managing a Fortune 500 company's public relations. We lived in a 7-bedroom colonial house with perfectly manicured lawns that stretched toward Long Island Sound. I was the second of 4 children, sandwiched between my older brother James and my younger siblings Emma and Daniel. James came first, the crown prince who could do no wrong. He sailed through Yale Law School and joined a prestigious firm in Manhattan before his 30th birthday. Then came me, Gloria, the one who loved books more than business deals and preferred painting landscapes to attending country club galas. Emma arrived 2 years after me, our parents' redemption story, who announced at age 12 that she would become a neurosurgeon. Daniel the baby came last, blessed with the kind of athletic ability that had college scouts showing up to his high school lacrosse games. Our house operated on a merit system disguised as love. Report cards went on the refrigerator only if they were perfect. Trophies lined the mantel in order of importance. Dinner conversations revolved around accomplishments, never feelings. I learned early that in the Patterson family, you were only as valuable as your latest achievement. I tried to play their game. Really, I did. I graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern with a degree in journalism. I won awards for my investigative pieces in the college newspaper. I interned at the Washington Post. But when I sat my parents down in the spring of my senior year to share my job offer from a nonprofit investigative journalism outlet, the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Journalism, my father said, pronouncing it like a disease. We discussed this, Gloria. You were supposed to apply to law school. James already made the connections at Harvard. But I don't want to be a lawyer, I said, my voice steady, even as my hands shook under the table. I want to tell stories that matter. I want to expose corruption and give voice to people who don't have one. My mother set down her wine glass with a sharp click. And how exactly will you afford a life on a journalist's salary? How will you maintain the lifestyle you're accustomed to? Maybe I don't want that lifestyle, I replied. The silence that followed should have been my first warning. My father stood up from the table without a word. My mother followed. They left me sitting alone in the dining room, staring at the empty chairs that would soon define my relationship with them. The erosion started small, almost imperceptible, like coastal cliffs being eaten away by waves, one grain of sand at a time. James announced his engagement to Catherine that fall. The whole family received beautiful cream-colored invitations with gold embossing. Everyone except me. When I called to ask about it, James sounded confused. Oh, Gloria, didn't Mom tell you we're keeping it really small? Just immediate family and Catherine's side. But I am immediate family, I said. You know what I mean. Core family. The ones who are really involved in each other's lives. I attended anyway, showing up in my best dress, only to find there was no seat for me at the family table. I spent the evening standing by the bar watching my parents beam as they toasted their successful son and his equally successful fiancée, both Harvard Law graduates, both destined for the kind of life my parents could brag about at the country club. 2 months later, I came home for Thanksgiving to find Emma had completely taken over my childhood bedroom. My posters were gone. My bookshelf had been replaced with her medical textbooks. My desk now held her anatomy models. Oh, I thought you weren't using it anymore, Emma said when I stood frozen in the doorway. Since you barely come home these days. I was here last month, I reminded her. She shrugged. Mom said you were basically moved out permanently, living your alternative lifestyle and all that. Alternative lifestyle? That's what they called my career in journalism. like I had joined a commune or started following a cult instead of working 60-hour weeks exposing corporate fraud and municipal corruption. Christmas that year was worse. I arrived at my usual time, arms full of carefully chosen gifts for everyone. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine, just like always. But when we sat down for dinner, there were only 5 place settings. "Oh, Gloria," my mother said, feigning surprise. "We weren't sure you were coming. You've been so busy with your little writing job." Daniel, then 16, looked confused. "Mom, she RSVP'd to the group text." "What group text?" I asked. The silence told me everything. They had a family group chat. Without me. My mother busied herself getting an extra plate, making a show of rearranging the entire table to squeeze me in, sighing dramatically with each adjustment. I sat through dinner listening to them discuss plans for a family vacation, to Martha's Vineyard plans that had been extensively coordinated in the group chat I wasn't part of. "We can probably find you a room somewhere nearby," my father offered half-heartedly, "if you can get the time off from your job." "It's fine," I said, cutting into my turkey with more force than necessary. "I'm working on a big story that week anyway." No one asked what the story was about. No one ever asked about my work unless it was to make subtle digs about my salary or suggest I was wasting my potential. James spent 20 minutes describing his latest case, something about corporate mergers that had everyone hanging on every word. Emma detailed her MCAT preparation with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious experiences. Daniel's touchdown pass in the state semifinals got a play-by-play recreation that lasted through dessert. When I mentioned that my investigative series on wage theft had won a state journalism award, my mother changed the subject to ask Emma about her medical school applications. Year 2 of being forgotten began with my birthday. January 15th came and went without a single call from my family. Not even a text. I waited all day thinking maybe they were planning something. A surprise. A gesture to bridge the growing gap between us. By midnight, I had my answer. Emma's birthday was January 20th, 5 days after mine. She got a party at the country club with 50 guests, a cake that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and a new MacBook for medical school. I found out through Instagram, through photos posted by cousins who asked in the comments why I wasn't there. "We tried to call you." My mother lied when I confronted her. "Your phone must not be working properly." My phone worked fine for everyone else in my life. My colleagues never had trouble reaching me. My friends always got through. But somehow, mysteriously, my family could never seem to connect. Spring brought my father's annual charity golf tournament, an event I'd attended every year since I was 7 years old. I always ran the registration table, had done it for so long that regular attendees knew me by name. This year, I showed up to find Emma in my spot, acting like she'd been doing it forever. "There must be some confusion," I told the event coordinator. He checked his clipboard, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Miss Patterson, but you're not on the volunteer list. Mr. Patterson said you were unavailable this year." I found my father on the 9th hole laughing with his business partners. He didn't even have the decency to look surprised when he saw me. "Gloria, what are you doing here?" "I've worked this event for 15 years, I said. "Well, things change. Emma's taking a more active role in family affairs, now that she's preparing for medical school. The medical community loves to see civic engagement. And my civic engagement doesn't count. I literally investigate corruption for a living." He turned back to his golf game. "That's different." Everything I did was different. Wrong. Not enough. I discovered they'd had a family reunion in July, when Aunt Patricia accidentally mentioned it at the grocery store. 30 relatives gathered at our house for a weekend, and I lived 40 minutes away. When I saw the photos on Facebook, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. In the big family portrait on the front lawn, they'd posed exactly as we always did, but with my spot naturally filled in by Emma shifting over. Like I'd never existed at all. My grandmother Eleanor was the only one who seemed to notice my absence from family events. She called me directly, bypassing my parents entirely. "Where have you been, darling girl?" she asked. "I never see you anymore." "I'm not invited, Grandma," I told her honestly. Nonsense. Family doesn't need invitations. But apparently, I did. When Thanksgiving rolled around again, I decided not to wait for an invitation that wouldn't come. I showed up with my contribution, the cranberry sauce I'd made every year since high school. My mother looked at it like I'd brought a bomb to dinner. Oh, we already have cranberry sauce. Emma made some from scratch using a recipe she found in a medical journal about antioxidants. The table was set for 5 again. This time they didn't even pretend to make room. I ate standing at the kitchen counter while they discussed James's promotion and Emma's interview at Johns Hopkins. When Daniel mentioned seeing my byline in the Boston Globe, my father changed the subject to Daniel's college recruitment letters. Then came the family portrait session. I found out about it when Emma posted a photographer's sneak peek on Instagram with the caption, "Perfect family, perfect day." There they were, all 5 of them, coordinated in navy and white, posed in front of the house where I grew up. The photographer had them arranged exactly as our family portraits had always been arranged, except my spot between James and Emma had been erased. They'd closed the gap so seamlessly, it looked like I'd never been there at all. I screenshot the photo and sent it to the family group chat. I discovered I was excluded from sending it individually to each of them with a single question mark. James responded first. "You're always so busy with work, we didn't want to bother you." Emma wrote, "It was spontaneous. No time to coordinate with your hectic schedule." My parents didn't respond at all. The final insult came at Christmas. I arrived to find stockings hung on the mantel, one for each family member. James, Emma, Daniel, Mom, Dad. 5 stockings. There had always been 6. Mine, the one my grandmother had needle-pointed with my name when I was born, was nowhere to be seen. "Where's my stocking?" I asked my mother. She didn't look up from arranging cookies on a plate. "Oh, it must be in storage somewhere. We're trying to declutter." But nothing else was decluttered. Every other childhood memento remained in its place. James's first baseball trophy, Emma's piano recital ribbons, Daniel's artwork from kindergarten. Only my traces had been systematically removed. That night I excused myself early and went to my grandmother's house instead. She lived in the carriage house on the back of our property, a cozy 2-bedroom cottage that felt more like home than the main house ever had. "They're erasing me, Grandma," I said, crying into her shoulder. She held me tight, her fingers stroking my hair. "I see it, darling. I see everything they're doing." "Why don't they love me?" She pulled back to look me in the eye. "Some people can only love what they can control. You've always been too bright, too independent for them to contain. That terrifies people like your parents." We spent the rest of Christmas together, just the 2 of us, eating Chinese takeout and watching old movies. She told me stories about my grandfather, who died before I was born, how he'd been the black sheep of his family too. "He was a teacher," she said. "His family wanted him to take over the bank, but he wanted to shape young minds instead. They never forgave him for choosing purpose over profit. But you loved him anyway." "I loved him because of it, not despite it," she said. "The bravest thing a person can do is be themselves in a world that's constantly trying to make them someone else." My grandmother Eleanor became my lifeline over the next 2 years. While my parents and siblings continued their campaign of erasure, she made sure I knew I was seen. We had standing lunch dates every Sunday at her cottage. She'd cook pot roast and tell me stories about the family history my parents never wanted, discuss the failures and scandals, and black sheep who'd been written out of the official narrative. "Your great Aunt Rose was a lot like you," she told me one afternoon, pulling out a dusty photo album. "Became a war correspondent in the 1940s. The family told everyone she was a secretary, too ashamed to admit a Patterson woman was trudging through mud in Europe with the soldiers. What happened to her? She won a Pulitzer, died at 92 surrounded by friends and admirers. Never married, never had children, but she had a life full of purpose. The family never spoke to her again after she refused to come home and marry the banker they'd picked out for her." I saw myself in Rose's determined eyes, the same stubborn set to her jaw that I saw in my own mirror. Grandma Eleanor saw it too. "I've been thinking about my will," she said one day apropos of nothing. "Grandma, don't talk like that." "I'm 87, darling. It's practical, not morbid. I want you to know that I see how they treat you. I see James swooping in once a month with his lawyer smile and store-bought flowers. I see Emma only visiting when she needs something. I see Daniel forgetting I exist unless his parents remind him. But you're here every week. You remember my doctor's appointments. You pick up my prescriptions. You actually listen when I talk. She took my hand in her papery soft grip. I'm leaving you the cottage and my jewelry collection. The vintage pieces from the 1920s that Emma keeps eyeing. Those are yours. This house where you actually feel welcome. That's yours too. Grandma, I don't care about any of that. I know you don't. That's exactly why you should have it. 6 months later, she had a stroke. I was the one who found her arriving for our Sunday lunch to discover her collapsed in the garden. I rode in the ambulance, held her hand through the emergency room chaos, and set up camp in her hospital room. For 3 weeks, I barely left her side. I read her favorite books aloud, played her beloved Glenn Miller recordings, and fought with doctors when they wanted to discharge her to a substandard facility. My family's visits were perfectly scheduled for maximum visibility and minimum effort. James came during visiting hours, when the halls were full of witnesses staying just long enough to be seen. Emma showed up with textbooks studying for her boards while Grandma slept. Daniel came once, looked uncomfortable, and left after 10 minutes. My parents treated it like a business obligation, checking their phones while asking perfunctory questions about prognosis and timeline. But at night, when the hospital grew quiet and Grandma's breathing became labored, I was the only one there. I held her hand through the fear, sang the lullabies she'd sung to me as a child, and promised her she wasn't alone. The cottage, she whispered one night, her voice barely audible. The jewelry. Don't let them take it from you. Grandma, please, just focus on getting better. She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Promise me. I promise. She died the next morning just as the sun painted her hospital room gold. I was holding her hand, telling her about my latest investigation into city council corruption, when she took one last breath and let go. The nurse found me sobbing over her still body, completely alone. It took 2 hours for any of my family to respond to my calls. The funeral was a production, my parents in their element as they performed grief for the community. My father gave a eulogy about family values that made me physically ill. James spoke about legacy and tradition. Emma read a poem she'd clearly Googled that morning. No one asked me to speak until the pastor noticed the omission and called me forward. I talked about the real Eleanor Patterson, the woman who defied her family to marry for love, who'd raised 4 children and still found time to volunteer at the library, who'd taught me that integrity mattered more than image, who'd seen me when everyone else looked through me. I talked until my father's cough signaled I'd gone on too long, embarrassing them with my genuine emotion at their perfectly choreographed performance. The will reading was scheduled for the following week at James's law firm. I arrived to find the family already assembled, looking like they were dividing up prizes rather than mourning a loss. The lawyer, James's partner, read through the preliminary bequests, charitable donations mostly. Then came the personal assets. To my grandson James, I leave my municipal bonds portfolio. James nodded, satisfied. To my granddaughter Emma, I leave my medical text collection and the sum of $50,000 for her education. Emma smiled, already calculating. To my grandson Daniel, I leave my late husband's watch collection and vintage car. Daniel perked up at the mention of the Mustang. To my son Robert and daughter-in-law Margaret, I leave the main house and all remaining financial assets. My parents exchanged pleased looks. The lawyer paused, shuffling papers. There seems to be an addendum here dated just 2 months ago. My heart sank. I knew what was coming before he read it. The previous bequest to Gloria Patterson regarding the carriage house and jewelry collection is hereby revoked. These items shall be incorporated into the main estate. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me, their faces carefully neutral. I felt the blood drain from my face as the lawyer continued. The cottage is to be sold with proceeds divided among the 3 grandchildren who have shown dedication to family values and traditions. That's not right, I said, my voice shaking. She promised me. She told me specifically just weeks before she died. My mother's voice was ice. Mother was clearly not in her right mind toward the end. We had to protect her interests. You mean you convinced her to change it? I said, understanding flooding through me. You went behind my back while I was caring for her and convinced a dying woman to change her will. We did what was best for the family, my father said. You've made it clear you don't want to be part of this family's traditions. Why should you benefit from its assets? I sat with her every day for 3 weeks. Where were you? We have responsibilities, James said smoothly. Real careers that don't allow us to take weeks off. She was dying, and we handled it appropriately, Emma added. Not everyone needs to be dramatic about grief. I looked at each of their faces, searching for any sign of shame or regret. There was none. They'd stolen my grandmother's last gift to me and felt completely justified. The jewelry, I said desperately. She specifically wanted me to have the vintage pieces. Those are family heirlooms, my mother said, already wearing Grandma's Art Deco bracelet. They should stay with family. I stood up, my legs shaking. I am family. Are you? My father asked. You've spent years rejecting everything we stand for. You chose journalism over law. You chose activism over achievement. You chose strangers' stories over your family's success. Why should you get to cherry pick the benefits of being a Patterson when you reject everything else? The lawyer looked uncomfortable but continued. There is one small bequest. Gloria Patterson is to receive Eleanor Patterson's cookbook collection. Cookbooks. They'd left me cookbooks while dividing up millions in assets. I almost laughed at the cruelty of it. I watched James already calculating the value of the cottage for division. Emma was texting, probably telling her boyfriend about the windfall. Daniel seemed oblivious, just happy about the car. My parents sat with the satisfaction of people who'd won a game I didn't know we were playing. Keep it all, I said quietly. Every penny, every piece. I don't want anything from any of you. I walked out of that office and out of their lives. They didn't even call after me. The next 2 years transformed me in ways I never thought possible. I moved across the country to Seattle, as far from Connecticut as I could get while staying on the same coast. I told myself it was for a job opportunity, an investigative position with a nonprofit focused on corporate accountability. But really, I just needed to be somewhere where no one knew me as a Patterson. I rented a studio apartment in Capitol Hill, a far cry from the 7-bedroom colonial I'd grown up in, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture I chose, every picture I hung, every book on the shelf was there because I wanted it, not because it projected the right image. For the first time in my life, I could breathe without feeling like I was disappointing someone. The work saved me. I threw myself into investigations with the fervor of someone with nothing left to lose. I exposed a construction company's wage theft scheme that recovered $3 million for workers. I uncovered a city councilman's kickback operation that led to federal indictments. I revealed how a beloved local charity was funneling 90% of donations to administrative costs. Each story felt like proof that I'd chosen the right path, even if it was a path I walked alone. 6 months into my Seattle life, I met Marcus at a coffee shop where I was reviewing documents for a story. He was a software engineer with kind eyes and a laugh that made everyone in the room smile. He noticed I'd been nursing the same cold coffee for 3 hours and brought me a fresh one without being asked. You look like you're solving world hunger over here, he said. Just regular hunger, I replied, showing him the wage theft statistics, making sure people get paid for their work. Instead of glazing over like my family always had, he pulled up a chair. Tell me more. Marcus listened like my work mattered. He asked questions that showed he was actually paying attention. He got angry at the injustices I uncovered, celebrated, when my stories led to real change. He introduced me to his friends, a group of activists and artists and engineers, who welcomed me without needing to know my pedigree. They cared about what I did not, what my business card said. 1 year into our relationship, I finally told Marcus about my family. We were hiking in the Cascades, surrounded by the kind of natural beauty that makes you feel safe enough to reveal your wounds. They erased me. I said the words falling like stones into the silence. Systematically removed me from their lives because I didn't fit their vision. He stopped walking and turned to face me. Their loss, he said simply. Their profound, idiotic loss. That night he held me while I cried for the family I'd never really had. The next morning he made breakfast and asked, "What would make you feel free?" "A new name," I said without thinking. "Gloria Patterson died in that lawyer's office. I want to be someone else." "Then be someone else," he said. "Choose who you want to be." The legal name change process took 3 months. I chose Grace Mitchell. Grace because I wanted to move through the world with it. Mitchell because it was my grandmother Rose's middle name, the war correspondent who'd been written out of family history. The day the court approved it, I felt like I'd been released from a prison I'd been born into. I kept tabs on my family through a private investigator, a luxury I justified as professional curiosity. The reports came monthly dry summaries of their lives that read like corporate briefings. James's firm was investigating irregularities in his billing. He'd been inflating hours for years, assuming his Patterson name would protect him. Emma failed her boards twice the pressure of perfection finally cracking her facade. She'd started taking Adderall to study, then couldn't stop. Daniel tore his ACL senior year, ending his lacrosse career, and with it, his identity. He had no backup plan because no one ever taught him he might need one. My father's real estate empire started crumbling when interest rates rose. He'd over-leveraged, assuming the market would always go up. My mother's social standing fell with their fortune. The country club friends disappeared when the membership fees went unpaid. The charity boards found new members when the donations dried up. I felt nothing reading these reports. No satisfaction, no sympathy. They were strangers' stories as removed from my life as the investigations I conducted for work. My career, meanwhile, soared. The journalism award my family had dismissed was followed by 3 more. The Seattle Times tried to poach me. The Washington Post called twice. But I stayed with the nonprofit where the work mattered more than the masthead. I started getting invited to speak at conferences teaching young journalists how to follow paper trails and protect sources. I published articles in national magazines always under Grace Mitchell, building a reputation entirely separate from the Patterson name. Marcus proposed on a Tuesday, nothing fancy, just the two of us making dinner in our apartment. He got down on one knee between the cutting board and the stove, holding a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "I want to build a life with you," he said. "A real family. The kind where everyone has a seat at the table." I said yes while crying into the pasta sauce. We planned a small wedding, 20 people who actually knew us, who'd seen us at our worst, and chose to celebrate us anyway. I didn't send invitations to Connecticut. Grace Mitchell had no family to invite. The investigators' report that month included a note: "The Patterson family has hired a private investigator to locate Gloria Patterson. Financial difficulties have intensified. They appear to be seeking assistance." I destroyed the report and told my investigator to stop sending them. I didn't need to know anymore. Gloria Patterson was gone, and Grace Mitchell had no interest in ghosts. 2 more years passed in my new life as Grace Mitchell. Marcus and I bought a craftsman house in Ballard with a garden where I grew the tomatoes my grandmother Eleanor had taught me to cultivate. We adopted a rescue dog named Benson, who had no interest in pedigrees. I was promoted to senior investigative journalist, leading a team of young reporters who reminded me daily why I'd chosen this work. The universe has a twisted sense of timing. Just as I'd finally stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped flinching when someone called out Gloria on the street. My past caught up with me. I was in Connecticut for a journalism conference, a 3-day event at Yale that I'd almost skipped until Marcus convinced me I'd earned the right to be in any room in any state, regardless of ghosts. The conference was invigorating. I gave a keynote about investigating corporate malfeasance that earned a standing ovation. Young journalists approached me afterward, eager and idealistic, reminding me of myself before I'd learned that sometimes the biggest betrayals come from those who claim to love you most. On the last day, I stopped at a coffee shop in New Haven, the same one I'd frequented during my Northwestern years when I'd visited James at Yale. I was reviewing my notes when someone said, "Gloria." I looked up to find Emma standing there, but barely. The accomplished pre-med student I'd known was gone. In her place stood a hollow-eyed woman, whose designer clothes couldn't hide the weight loss, the tremor in her hands, the look of someone who'd been running on empty for too long. I considered pretending not to know her, but something in her desperation made me pause. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "Gloria, please," she said, sinking into the chair across from me uninvited. "I know it's you. I've seen your pictures from the journalism awards." "Grace Mitchell." "I know." My silence was confirmation enough. "You look good," she said, her voice cracking. "Successful, happy." "I am," I said simply. She started crying, then ugly sobs that drew stares from other patrons. The Emma I'd known would have died before showing such public emotion. This Emma didn't seem to care. "Everything's gone," she whispered. Dad's company folded. The house is in foreclosure. James is facing disbarment and criminal charges. Daniel's in rehab for the third time. Mom spends her days drinking wine and calling people who won't call back. I waited, saying nothing. We need help, she continued. We need money for lawyers for Daniel's treatment for somewhere to live. We thought if we could find you, maybe you could help. You're the only one who made it out okay. I didn't make it out, I said quietly. I was pushed out, erased, forgotten, for 8 years. That's not true, You just would accidentally forgot my birthday for 8 years, accidentally removed me from every family photo, accidentally convinced Grandma Eleanor to change her will while I was caring for her. Emma flinched at each word. We were wrong. I see that now. Family should stick together, especially in hard times. Family, I repeated, tasting the word like something bitter. Where was family when I was standing outside looking in at Christmas? Where was family when you took my room, my place, my existence, and acted like it was nothing? We made mistakes. No, Emma. Mistakes are forgetting to call on a birthday once. What you did was systematic erasure. You deleted me from the family because I didn't enhance the Patterson brand. She leaned forward desperately. We'll make it right. We'll apologize. We'll include you in everything from now on. Include me. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think I've been sitting in Seattle waiting for you to include me? I have a life, a career, a husband, a real family who doesn't measure my worth by my achievements or my bank account. Husband, she said, startled. You got married? 2 years ago. Beautiful wedding, 20 people who actually wanted to be there. No one keeping score of who was more successful or whose gift was more expensive. Emma's face crumbled further. Gloria, please. Daniel might not make it without proper treatment. James could go to jail. Mom and Dad are talking about ending things rather than facing the shame. For a moment, I felt the old Gloria stirring the one who would have emptied her bank account to help them despite everything. But Grace Mitchell had learned that some bridges once burned were meant to stay ash. I investigated Dad's company, I said calmly. 2 years ago. Published the expose under Grace Mitchell. The contractor kickbacks the safety violations, the workers who died because he cut corners. I didn't know he was my father when I started, but when I found out I didn't stop. He destroyed people's lives for profit. James did the same with his billing fraud. You all knew and looked the other way as long as the money kept flowing. Emma's face went white. You're the one who exposed Dad. I'm a journalist. I expose corruption. The fact that the corruption was familiar just made the story more personal. How could you? She whispered. How could I? How could you celebrate Christmas while I stood outside? How could you take grandmother's last gift to me? How could you erase me and then ask me to save you? I stood up, gathering my things. Emma grabbed my wrist, her grip desperate. Please, Gloria, we're desperate. We have nothing left. I gently removed her hand. I'm not Gloria. Gloria Patterson died in that law office when you stole her inheritance and told her she wasn't family. I'm Grace Mitchell, and Grace Mitchell doesn't know you. You can't just walk away from family. I turned back one last time. You did. 8 years ago. You just didn't think there would be consequences. I left her crying in that coffee shop the same way she'd left me crying countless times. But unlike those times I didn't cry, I walked out into the Connecticut sunshine and felt lighter with every step. Marcus was waiting at the hotel, ready to drive us to the airport, back to our life in Seattle, where Grace Mitchell was building something real on the ashes of Gloria Patterson's erasure. The healing didn't happen overnight. After encountering Emma in that coffee shop, I spent 3 days in bed shaking with the kind of rage I'd buried for years. Marcus brought me tea and held me while I screamed into pillows, finally letting out the fury I'd swallowed for so long. I started therapy with Dr. Sarah Winters, a specialist in family trauma, who didn't try to convince me that forgiveness was mandatory for healing. Sometimes the healthiest thing we can do is accept that some people are incapable of loving us the way we deserve, she said during our third session. Your family didn't forget you. Forgetting is passive. They actively erased you. There's a difference. We worked through the grief in layers. First, the anger that burned so hot it felt like it might consume me. Then the bargaining, the what ifs that haunted my dreams. What if I'd gone to law school? What if I'd played their game better? What if I'd been less myself and more what they wanted? You're grieving the family you should have had, Dr. Winters explained. The parents who should have loved you unconditionally. The siblings who should have celebrated your differences. That grief is real and valid. Slowly, I started to heal. I joined a support group for family estrangement, discovering a room full of people who understood the particular pain of being deemed unworthy by those who were supposed to love you most. There was Rachel, whose parents disowned her for marrying outside their religion. David, whose family cut him off for being gay. Monica, whose siblings excluded her after she reported their father's abuse. We became each other's chosen family, proof that blood doesn't determine bond. 6 months after the coffee shop encounter, a letter arrived at my office forwarded from my old journalism contacts. My mother's handwriting was still perfect, the controlled cursive of someone who practiced penmanship like a competitive sport. Gloria, it began. I know you've changed your name, but you'll always be Gloria to me. We are in desperate circumstances. Your father's pride won't let him reach out, but I'm begging you. Whatever happened between us, we're still your family. Please come home. I held the letter for a long time, feeling its weight. Then I walked to the shredder and fed it through, watching her words turn to confetti. I gathered the pieces and scattered them from the Fremont Bridge, watching them float away on the wind like the obligations I no longer carried. Marcus and I got married again that year, a proper ceremony this time, with our chosen family filling the seats. Rachel was my maid of honor. David and Monica did readings. My journalism mentors sat in the front row where parents should be. My team from work threw rice as we ran to the car. It was joyful and messy and real, everything my biological family's events had never been. I used part of my inheritance from a journalism award to create the Eleanor Rose Foundation, named for my grandmother and great-aunt. It provides scholarships for young journalists from troubled families, kids who are choosing purpose over their parents' plans. Every year I meet the recipients and see myself in their determined faces, their refusal to be diminished. The investigator sent one last unsolicited report. James was convicted of embezzlement and serving 3 years. Emma was in inpatient treatment for substance abuse. Daniel had dropped out of his 4th rehab program. My parents sold everything and moved to a 1-bedroom apartment in Bridgeport. The Patterson name, once synonymous with success in Connecticut, had become a cautionary tale about pride and fall. I felt nothing reading it. They were characters in someone else's story as distant as the subjects of my investigations. I told the investigator to lose my number. My life as Grace Mitchell flourished. I won a Pulitzer for my series on healthcare fraud, standing on that stage, with Marcus cheering in the audience, my chosen family sending congratulations from around the country. The girl who'd been erased from family photos was now in newspapers nationwide. The name they'd removed from their lips was spoken at journalism schools. The daughter they'd deemed disappointing was changing laws with her words. I built my own traditions. Sunday dinners with friends instead of silent family meals. Celebrations based on joy, not achievements. Photo walls filled with people who chose to be there. A home where everyone had a seat at the table, no questions asked. Sometimes in quiet moments, I wondered if they ever looked for my byline. If they knew Grace Mitchell was their Gloria. If they understood that their erasure had been my liberation. But mostly I didn't think of them at all. I was too busy living the life they'd never imagined for me, surrounded by people who loved me not for what I achieved, but for who I chose to be. The deepest wound taught me the deepest truth. When people show you that you don't matter to them, believe them. Don't beg for scraps at a table where you'll never be welcome. Build your own table. Set it with love and authenticity. Invite people who see you, not through you. My family forgot me for 8 years. They removed my photos, erased my name, pretended I'd never existed. They thought they were punishing me for refusing to conform. Instead, they freed me to transform. I changed my name not to hide, but to honor the person I became without them. I never went back, not from spite, but from self-respect. I watched their world collapse, not with satisfaction, but with the detachment of a stranger watching strangers face consequences of their own creation. Gloria Patterson died at 32 alone, in a law office abandoned by blood. Grace Mitchell was born from that death, surrounded by chosen family, fulfilled by purpose, anchored by real love. My family erased me thinking it was their ultimate power. They never understood it was my ultimate gift. When you're erased by those who should love you most, you get to rewrite yourself entirely. You get to choose your name, your family, your worth. You get to build a life that doesn't need their approval to be valid. They forgot me for 8 years. In forgetting me, they freed me to remember who I really was. Someone who deserved to be celebrated, not tolerated. Someone whose worth wasn't measured in achievements, but in authenticity. Someone who belonged at a table that welcomed all of her, not just the parts that photographed well. My family purposely forgot me for 8 years, so I changed my name and never came back. Not because I couldn't forgive them, but because I finally understood that some tables aren't worth sitting at no matter how much you once craved a seat. The greatest gift toxic family can give you is their absence. It creates space for real love to grow. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from family who couldn't see your worth? Have you built your own table with people who chose you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about rising from the ashes of others' expectations. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to choose yourself over blood. And remember, family isn't about DNA. It's about who shows up, who stays, and who sees you when you're invisible to everyone else. Thank you for listening to my story. May you find the courage to leave tables where you're not celebrated, and the wisdom to build your own, where everyone feasts.